confronted with so many challenges and so many trouble at the time in the country called Nigeria. And sometimes we ask ourselves questions. How do we able to come out from these predicament we find ourselves? From the military to politics to social to economic to business and to welfare. Today on the train is the founder and CEO of Benola Initiative and FD Talks, retired Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo. Femi Gbadebo, it's nice to have you on the drill.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk about your earliest life as Femi Gbadebo being a combat pilot in the Nigerian Air Force.
That was an extended period. One was young, and we did some crazy things, aerobatics. Apart from missions, we also took part in national displays, Air Force days when we flew and performed aerobatic missions and so on. But there were accidents, there were traumatic periods, one lost colleagues. I myself had a few close shaves, if you could call it that. But to the glory of God, I'm here.
Okay, at that time where all this combat response was happening, or were you at any time you were scared of your life, maybe probably in the course of duty?
Well, you see, one of the beautiful things about youth is that once you've been trained to a certain level, you don't see the possibility of you going wrong. And that's also the beauty of knowledge. When you have knowledge and you're protected within that cell, that aircraft where you are, and you always believe that you can go and come back from every mission. Of course, when you lose one or two friends, it can be a little bit scary, but you get back and you continue doing your job.
Because we have cases of the aviation industry where we saw the issue of the Sosoliso plane crash and then other. Sometimes people are a little bit skeptical about the management in terms of technical when it comes to flying aircraft in the country. So at that time, was there any difficulty at one time when you were up there and there was a little bit of issue?
Well, you see, flying combat is totally different from flying commercial.
Okay.
When you fly combat, you are to a large extent involved in the management of your machine. Not that you do the maintenance, but you have a hands-on knowledge of what is being done. And every time you take off an airplane, you have the final right of refusal, so to speak. There is you have a book which every technician, whether it's the engine man, the hydraulics, the avionics, the oil, whatever, has gone through, and they sign to show that they've done their proper checks and it's okay. And it's only after you've seen those things and you've approved that you now go in and do your own tests, run up the engine and so on. And even up to when the aircraft is about to take off, even for the commercial aircraft, there are still certain parameters you're looking for, even on the takeoff roll. And there's always a stage where you can refuse to continue with the flight. So it's actually a question of your knowledge and understanding of the system. With a commercial aircraft, well, there's a bit of a difference in the sense that most of the checks and all have been done by the technicians. And if you notice, most of the time the pilot just walks in and someone tells him everything is okay. Like a night flight to London, the pilot doesn't go out to look at the airplane, to check on the airplane. He's back.
So it simply means that basically it's unprofessional pilots that are actually flying the commercial aircraft, based, if I will take you that on your words.
No, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the circumstances are totally different. For instance, with a military aircraft, you can deploy from here to Calabar, for instance, where you and just a few technicians are the authority on your airplane.
Now, talking about the military, you being under a retired Air Vice Marshal who was trained to respond in times of combat or in terms of military or training and all that, relating it to security issues in our country, how would you say the military has responded so far in tackling insurgents and crisis in the country at large?
Well, you see, there's a big difference between the military taking on foreign agents trying to come into your country. The way the armed forces are set up, they're not supposed to actually operate within the territorial integrity of a country. They're to stop people from outside, let's say a foreign nation, or coming into Nigeria to take over our land space. The police are there, all kinds of civil agencies are there.
So what you're trying to say is, so for the Nigerian government to actually have a partnership with foreign nations to come over, it's something that we shouldn't go for.
No. What I'm saying is that, you see, if you have, let's say, a crisis in Oshodi or somewhere, the first one of the line of response is the Nigerian police. And that's why you have commissioner of police, you have your DPOs and everything. It is when things get to that level, when they are unable to contain it, that they now resort for military support. And they have to call for it. You know, the brigade commander in Ikeja cannot just say, oh, there's a riot in Oshodi, let me move my men there. That's not how it works. Because the training of the police is different from the training of the soldiers. So even when you bring out the soldiers, you now have a little bit of a problem. You see, if we're dealing with insurgents coming from outside, it's very easy to go out there and just exterminate everybody. But if you're going to go into Oshodi and then you have some hoodlums and all fighting, these are Nigerians. You can't just come out and deal with them as if they're totally different force. So it's a mindset issue, and that's why you find that the military, they come in, but sometimes they don't respond as fast as civilians expect them to respond.
But we're talking about the military. I want to believe that during your time and during your days, there seemed to be some sort of well-trained military officers compared to the ones we have today. Most people say the short service commission. Some people like the police, you just go for 8 or 9 months and then you're out. So people don't really have more confidence on the military these days, being the fact that it's a democratic regime and more like the military is sold out.
Well, not really. You see, if you bring the military anywhere there's a crisis, you will notice that the average Nigerian, would respond differently from the way they would respond to the police. And because they know that this man has been trained in the use of force, unlike the policeman, who is not exactly trained in the use of force. And then the kind of weaponry that the army would bring into a crisis would be much more devastating. But what we're dealing with now is a civilian regime. Don't forget, we were in a military regime for a long time, where the governor was also a military man. And then he probably was part of the ruling council, so to speak. His GOC was there. So the chain of command to get the military out was faster. Now you have a completely different system where the governor cannot order the military out.
How complete different system when it seems like most of the military people are the ones we still have today in the seat of affair as the chief of the president.
Well, you see, the president, General Muhammad Buhari, or whatever you want to call him, whether you call him President Buhari or General Buhari, is now a Democrat. And he's running under a different system. You see, when you have a military regime, he has maybe 12, 15 men who form the ruling council. They take decision, and that's it. Now he has a National Assembly that he must defer to. And every decision must be approved and backed by the National Assembly. It's a totally different ballgame. And then you're talking about a National Assembly that is made up of different parties. So while some people want you to succeed, some want you to fail.
All right. Speaking about the National Assembly, we will get back to that because we've seen where the president has outrightly disbursed some of the ideas coming from the National Assembly and is trying to exercise the power more like it's a military regime. But let's talk about you being the founder and the CEO of Benola Initiative and also FG Talks. Let's get to know what is it about Benola Initiative.
Benola is an initiative which I set up because of my son who was born with cerebral palsy, who's 22 years old now. Experience in managing him got me and my wife to understand that there are lots of issues that Nigerians prefer to just sweep under the table. A lack of understanding of disabilities, a lack of understanding of issues as to whether they're contagious or infectious and all, has given room to the stigma or the high level of stigmatization that you have in Nigeria and most African countries about disabilities. And because of that, nobody wants to come out and help or talk about it. And then you have religion, and you have traditional institutions that are busy talking about demons and casting out demons and people being possessed, etc., etc. So we decided to do something about it to help people to understand that there is an academic explanation to every person that is not quote unquote normal. And once you understand that, our ability to relate with each other becomes a lot better. So that's what Benol is doing. With FG Talks, I found out that when I started, people want me to talk about issues, talk about politics, religion, military, and so on. But I wanted to focus on disability. But the more I worked on disability, the more I realized that it's all around us. And our inability to cope with each other, a lot of frustrations we find with each other stems from the mere fact that we fail to understand that the other person is different. And it's our failure to recognize and cope or accept the other person's individual differences that leads to most of the frustrations we have in Nigeria, in traffic, in the office, and all.
So speaking on that, I quite remember you saying more like every single person is disabled. Can you throw more light on that? Why do you say so?
God is awesome. He made all of us in his image, which means we're all like him. But he loves variety. And he has a very unique way of making things. That's why our fingerprints are different, eye patterns are different, and the more man has studied man, the more he has come to understand that there are no two individuals that are the same. So the perception that some people are normal and some are abnormal, it comes from the fact that way back in life, we started to see some people as being superior to others. But the more science has educated us as to the realities of our inadequacies, the more we begin to realize that in our own individual uniqueness, that's really where the strength is. And it is by understanding these differences that we begin to have the unique human individuals we have. So everybody is different. Everybody has a disability. That's why some people are taller than others, some are shorter than others, some are fatter than others. Some are...
So you're trying to say now weight gain based on an individual eating junk food could be a form of disability?
Well, your inability to manage your situation. You see, the fact that somebody can decide to be a vegetarian, it's not as if he doesn't see meat, he doesn't see all the nice things in life. The mind that somebody can decide to be a teetotaler doesn't mean he's not seeing all the alcohol or everything around it, but he's gone beyond that. And that's why some people talk about mind over matter. When we are able to wean ourselves from the perception that you have to drink with the guys to be one of the guys, you have to do this to be one of the people, then you understand. Even people are afraid to be alone, whereas it is when the more time you spend by yourself, thinking, analyzing, understanding things, the better you become as an individual. That's why you'll find that when you go back in history, people like Einstein, people like so many other people, even today, the rich people, the Bill Gates, the Mark Zuckerberg, and so on, are they macho men? Do they have six-pack? Do they dress flashy? No, they're ordinary people. But suddenly, we've gone beyond that. You have to look this way to be successful. We have to see what's in your head. We have to listen to the same way. This idea of thinking outside the box.
I'm talking about listening to your head. I like the fact you just actually said that. I'm more keen about the disability of the mind, because it seems like a lot of people they have a disability in their mind. Like I already said, disability is not a function of the body; it's a state of mind. So how do we begin to transform the minds of people? Because this is, you talk about FG Talks, which is more like the motivational part of what you do. How do you begin to initiate people to disengage their mind over seeing themselves to be less inferior? Because I believe that's one of the strongest part of disability.
Well, you see, it's like if you understand the story of the lemon, how you turn lemon into lemonade. Honestly, if you don't identify your disability or that thing we call a disability, that difference is what makes us unique individuals. And it's your ability to own, I call it own your disability, instead of seeing it as a failure, but seeing it as a point of strength and projecting it. That makes you unique. So if you're very tall and everybody is short and they make you feel funny as a young child because you are too tall, it becomes a disability. It becomes something that could affect your ability to progress in life. But let's say somebody now sees you and say, boy, this guy could play basketball, and now brings you out on the pitch, and while people are struggling to put it in a basket, you just drop it in. And then suddenly you're the champion, you're the hero, and you're now a star. And you're no longer that guy who's ashamed of himself. You're that guy who everybody now says, I wish I was as tall as Mike. You understand? So whether you're obese, whether you're short, whatever it is, there's strength in it. You must find that strength, and you must begin to believe in yourself that God made you for a purpose. And that's the reason also when you have a child that has a disability, it's not because God wants to punish you. He saw the potential in you to rise above that problem. And until you see the purpose of Him giving you that child, you won't rise above it. You continue to feel sorry for yourself.
I know disability and cerebral palsy seem to be the initiative of Benola. And right now, a lot of Nigerians are in a hopeless situation where we don't even know where to turn to. The only place we turn to is church, and then the cry to God. And then we also see a lot of initiatives, a lot of NGOs, and just springing up from every corner. What is the difference between a Benola initiative and all of the other NGOs and initiatives we see around?
With all due respect, I'll tell you that a lot of people running NGOs are going after the money. Going after the money is identifying a cause. Let's say somebody has an ailment and he's going to die if we don't take the person to India or whatever, and then we come up with a budget of 20 million or something, and we go online and we make so much noise, and eventually we take this one person to India, and we're so happy that, praise God, something has happened. To me, that's not an NGO. The NGO part is, how do we educate people so that they don't get to this stage? How do we build empathy in our people so that we care for ourselves? You see, it's not about taking one person all the way to India with so much money. It's not solving the problem. There are hundreds of thousands who don't have access to this media or this individual to get that publicity, who are maybe not even as bad off. And if we can put funds together and set up a center here, and set up a home here, and set up counseling facilities and so on, we would solve a lot more problems.
Now, speaking about centers and facilities, we know we don't really have such, or let's say we don't really have that kind of facilities in the country. With Benola Initiative, how far have you gone in trying to maybe partners with some foreign agency or the federal government or the state government at large to see how these facilities could be built here in Nigeria?
We've done a lot of work. We've done designs. We've engaged a few state governments and one or two people at the federal level. But you see, until we change the mindset of the average Nigerian about disability and disability management, those things wouldn't happen. You can put 1,000 people in a hall and talk to them about disability. It's not changing things. You need to get those who make policy and those who are in a position to make or influence a change in policy to listen to the realities. I'll tell you without fear or favor that every well-placed individual in Nigeria is related to disability. Either they have a child, a sibling, or a friend who has a child who has a serious problem. But all they're thinking about is using their position to raise funds and take that child out of the country because they don't want to identify with the public. You see, the stigma thing is so bad that a successful businessman, it lives in fear of people thinking that he has used his child's, you see it in Nollywood, he's used his
some
child,
sort of ritual.
That's why he's rich. You understand? So these people, nobody wants to come out to say, oh, I have a child like that. I even have a lot of people who question me, why are you talking about your child? Because see, the more I talk, the more uncomfortable they become because of what they have done. Not that they've messed up their child, but they've lived in denial for so long that it has become normal not to mention that child or not to mention that aspect of their lives. But until we get to that stage, all we'll get is people playing lip service. So government will build a center. They won't train the manpower. They won't provide the medication and all the various things that these people need. And you just commission open it and go there 6 months later. It's just a shell. So it's a process. We must bring in volunteerism into our schools, primary, secondary,
does the government really assign into a rapid move to be able to create the centers? Because we believe that if the center, because the government talks more about employment and all, there are a lot of
these centers will create employment.
That's what I'm saying. So is the government.
You see, we need to understand the place of healthcare in Nigeria. At every state and federal level, when government talks about healthcare, what are they talking about? Building a structure where you can find a doctor, you'll find a nurse, if you're lucky, you'll find midwives for delivery. And occasionally, maybe you'll have dental facilities. That's all. No counseling, no therapy, no, provisional assistive devices like wheelchairs, walkers, and so on, until we understand that healthcare goes way beyond that. Things are not going to change. So that is the problem. We need massive education of our elites from the National Assembly and so many other things. You want to talk about inclusion, access into places for people with disability. It wouldn't happen because the whole National Assembly, the whole Federal Executive Council, most of the state bodies, they don't have a person with disability on board. So when they're discussing issues, disability doesn't show up. If you remember years ago, we didn't talk about the female issue. You didn't have a female toilet, you didn't have certain things in the boardrooms until women started to come in. So now you'd find in most top-level places, they'll have one toilet for the ladies, they'll probably have a powder room, they'll probably have certain things. And until we begin to recognize people with disability and we begin to give them the right positions in government and so on, decisions will be taken without them.
Yeah, we also discovered that because of the disability issues around Nigeria and across the world, some sort of people sort of having it tough for them securing a job. You rightly talk about people like Cobhams, one of Nigeria's finest musicians. These people are not really coming out to recognize with all the disability people out there. So how does Benola Initiative begin to help the disabled people in area of securing jobs in company because you feel you don't have a leg or you have one disability or the other? They seem to be cut off from the realities of life.
That's one of the most frustrating situations in which we found ourselves today. You see, there are parents who 30, 40 years ago took the initiative and trained their children with disability, polio, cerebral palsy, autism, name it, missing limbs. And some of those people have done very well. They have second degrees. Some of them are professionals. But unfortunately, apart from physiotherapists and we have lawyers here and there, but are they really gainfully employed? Are they allowed to maximize and get to the top of their profession? For instance, if we've had blind lawyers in Nigeria since more than 30 years ago. Why are we yet to have a blind lawyer or deaf and dumb person or so on in key positions? It is because the system has treated them like a form of tokenism. You see, a bank would be worried about how would customers think.
Talking about system, someone once said that the Nigerian system is built for you to fail, and then you make an extra effort to succeed. How true can that be?
Yes, you see, if we don't educate the people about disability, and we don't eradicate the stigma that we have, you find a bank would be, would be worried about what the customers would feel seeing this disabled person who is qualified to do the job, okay, being at the counter. And that's what you find in just about every profession. You go to a law firm, and then there's this vision impaired lawyer, and they tell you he's going to handle your case. Someone say, wow, excuse me, this is my life, and I'm not going to give it to this person, and so on. So until we get to that stage, when Nigerians begin to see beyond disability, begin to see the ability, because trust me, anybody who has a disability has a heightened ability in them somehow. And that's why some of them make excellent musicians, excellent artists, painters, name it. So it is for us to, first of all, identify these skills, train them, and then give them the opportunity to display. I mean, you talked about Cobans. You need to know how many people Cobans has empowered, inspired, and encouraged to, find themselves. Okay? Or even those who are employed by him. Look at Ayefele. Ayefele has, only God knows how many. He started with a band. He has a radio station. He has all kinds of people. This is a man who is physically impaired, okay? But until we begin to show them, until we begin to portray them as success stories, we will fail in bringing up more of them. And we must also find a way to get them to understand that their calling is not just to do what they've done now, but to begin to identify with their disability and to begin to push how parents of children with that kind of disability can be encouraged to train their kids, and how everybody else who has that kind of disability can aspire to become the best that they can be.
All right, talking about parent, I quite remember you do things for family. How are you able, because like you always know that everything begins from the smaller unit, which is family. How does Benola Initiative been able to motivate or to talk to families and parents? Because we see in some cases where some parents are even the one cursing their children and said, you're good for nothing, you're this, you can amount to nothing. So how does Benola Initiative and also FD Talks is been able to somehow educate families and parents in trying to lift up their children with words rather than bringing them down?
Well, we talk, we write, we have workshops, we had all kinds of things. But like I said, it's a societal thing. And most parents with children with disability, particularly cerebral palsy, they're only interested in what can I get from you? What can you do for my child? And when you tell them you're having a workshop, it's like, I don't need a workshop. I need somebody who will give me some Indomie, who will give me some whatever for my children and so on. Forgetting the fact that the mind is where the issue is. One of the things that we have failed in this part of the country is to understand that a child with a disability will survive because God wants them to survive. But most of them do not survive because the parents do not understand the issues. So you have depression, you have suicidal tendencies, you have homicide created by parents. Not necessarily putting a knife to the child's throat, you understand, but by neglecting the child, by failing to do certain things at the right time. Some of these children die.
So would you quickly let's talk about at state level and at federal level the government involvement in disability. Would you want to say how would you want to rate the government involvement in terms of cerebral palsy, disability of all kinds?
We have not even started. Yes, Lagos State has special persons bill. They have an office of disability affairs. A few other states, Plateau State, I think Enugu State also just signed their own person's bill a couple of months ago. The race is on. I know a few states have actually come to Lagos to visit the Office of Persons with Disability to begin to, I'm sure, see what they can do in their states. But we have a long way to go. Major problem, for instance, at the federal level, this is under the social welfare and so on and so forth. So when you have not even harmonized how you're going to handle disability in your country, you have a problem.
Thank you so much for coming on the program, The Drill. It's nice having you here.
Thank you.
All right, that is retired Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo, CEO and founder of Bedola Initiative and FG Talks. And we join us same time on the program, The Drill. I'm Jeffrey James.